Hold on, I'm unmuting Cheryl. Hello, everyone. We've got about 5 minutes before we begin. So sit tight and we'll get going in about 5 minutes. Are you on there, Cheryl?
Testing, testing. This would be my regular volume. How's that?
That sounds really crackly, Cheryl.
Can
you call in?
How about now?
Really crackly. Can you call in via phone?
Yes. What's the number for the phone?
Hold on.
I'll just use this one. This is easier. I'll just do it.
Whatever you're using now is really good. The phone is
the computer. It's still the computer.
Let me see if I can move this.
That sounds good right now.
Okay.
All right. How about now? Because this will be where I'll be.
That sounds great.
Okay. You'll introduce Cheryl and you'll let her know when you want her to start.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'll be listening.
Okay, we'll begin in about 2 or 3 more minutes. Okay, we've got noon, so we'll go ahead and get started. And I wanted to welcome everyone to our HR 30 webinar today called Emerging Drug and Alcohol Trends in the Workplace. This is a really important topic that we're really hearing a lot about. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. You'll see I have the question box I'm opening now on the control panel. If you have any questions as we go through, we're going to be leaving a little bit of time at the end for questions, but feel free to type any questions in that box, and if we can't get to them during the webinar, we'll try and get to you after with an answer to those questions. So I want to start by introducing our presenter today, Cheryl Lucas. We're really pleased to have Cheryl with us today. Cheryl is a senior EAP specialist and has been with Lytle EAP Partners for 9 years. She is a licensed professional counselor, a national certified counselor, an international certified addictions counselor, and a substance abuse professional, DOT SAP. Cheryl has been treating individuals with substance abuse and chemical dependency problems for more than 24 years. Cheryl's background includes working at leading treatment centers for more than 11 years, and she worked at the Department of Psychiatry at a leading hospital in Pittsburgh as a substance abuse liaison. Cheryl also has a private practice in which she treats individuals and families impacted by addiction. So Cheryl's quite an expert on the topic, and we're really delighted to have her with us today to talk about this important topic. So Cheryl, I'll turn it over to you, and you can take it from here.
Thank you very much, Beth. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. We're going to move through these trends pretty smoothly, so please feel free to take notes, and if you do have a question, we'll hit those at the end. We'll have about 5 minutes to cover those. I want to start out with the first slide, Beth. This is smoking alcohol. Now, this is a fairly new trend that is really increasing in the youth in particular, especially college-age individuals. As you can see, this young man has taken a 2-liter empty soda bottle, filled it with some alcohol, and what you do is you actually cork that top of the bottle and get a bicycle pump, and you place the needle inside the cork and pump air into the bottle, about 10 pumps worth, and you get a vaporized version of alcohol, and then you remove the cork, and then you actually inhale the vapor. And what happens is this inhaled gas goes right through to the lungs, to the brain, through the bloodstream. It bypasses the stomach, and it gets the individual drunk very quickly. So you could see the appeal when it comes to young people. Because alcohol bypasses the stomach and the liver, it isn't metabolized, and alcohol does not lose its potency. Now that's the draw, but unfortunately the risk here is that because it bypasses the stomach, the overdose risk of alcohol poisoning is higher because there's no stomach involvement to prompt a body to throw up the toxin, so the body's all ingesting that. And what's happened is society has grasped this technique, and even clubs and bars are adopting vaportinis, where they actually use the vaporized alcohol in their cocktails. And in many states, this is legal. So just to make you aware. Next slide, please. Okay, this is called Zerp or purple drink. And actually, this kind of technique is referenced in a lot of pop music and rap music. And you probably wouldn't even realize that you've already heard it, which I'm sure many of you had and didn't realize. Now, this is also very popular in the rap segment of the population, but young people in particular. And what it is actually you take a soft drink, Sprite or Mountain Dew, you mix Jolly Ranchers with either a prescription cough syrup or a non-prescription over-the-counter cough syrup, and actually it becomes purple because of the color of the cough syrup. But it creates quite a high, and this is very big in high schools and colleges. And sometimes this mixture is actually added into alcohol, and sometimes even marijuana blunts are dipped into it and smoked after that. But you can imagine the appeal of a young person who's trying to be creative that does not perhaps have a prescription or is not 21 or does not have access to alcohol, can actually, in a lot of stores, can actually purchase the regular cough syrup over the counter and mix it with this. And this is also addictive in nature and can cause overdose as well. Next slide. Now, the new trend is vaping. And many of you can remember when in the shopping malls we used to have the kiosks where the electronic cigarettes or e-cigarettes were big years ago. Well, now vaporizing is the new thing, and the e-cigarettes have changed their forms. Now, this is just a small sampling of some of the different vaporizers you can see out there, but with many of the states moving towards legalizing marijuana or at least cannabinoid oils, the vape shops are opening up everywhere. And very often there are substances that are hidden away in these stores that are not necessarily legal, but it's kind of behind the scenes. You can go in and get a number of things, but these particular devices can house synthetic substances and marijuana derivatives. Next slide. Now, the next substance I would like to show you, this is running rampant on college campuses. I do have a lot of young people that I've worked with over the years that have gotten into this form of marijuana use. Now, it's called dabbing. Now, you've seen the dab move on sporting events. Some of the sporting athletes do the dab. There's a dance. But actually, there's a chemical substance that young people in particular are using, and it's taking a marijuana bud. You're taking the actual bud and putting it in butane fluid like you would from a lighter. And the bud is soaked in this butane fluid until the oils separate, and then it creates a film on the top. So you skim off the film and you put it on wax paper. Now, if you want it a little more solid, you let it dry for a while, and it looks like rock candy. We call that shatter. If you want the more moist version, that's like a wax or honey, looks like earwax to me, but honey. And the thing is, you can take a little dab of it and you literally put that in an e-cigarette or a vaporizer, otherwise known as a vape, and you smoke it, and it heats the substance. And this marijuana concentrate is actually known on the street as 710, and 710 is actually oil spelled backwards. But it can, dabs contain high levels of THC, ranging from 40 to 80%. And this is 4 times more potent than high-grade marijuana, which is usually 20%. And also, the dab mixture is being put into bakery items and also dried fruit, so you're getting a lot of edibles. And this is where we're seeing a lot of emergency room visits because people are getting an overdose amount of these substances without being aware of how much they're actually ingesting. Next slide, please. Okay, I just want to hit on this particular one. This is called Flaca, and this is one of the synthetic designer drugs, and unfortunately we're really, over the years, moving into the designer drug age. And with Flaca in particular, it produces a similar high to cocaine, but it lasts much longer. It is very potent, it's lethal, it's a synthetic drug that has a huge potential for overdose. It can be injected, smoked, or snorted. It's a cheap alternative to cocaine, and it can cause permanent brain and kidney damage. Okay, next slide. Okay, I want to spend some time on Kratom because nationally it is getting a lot of attention. Now I actually have people I'm working with that are struggling with this particular substance, but I'll give you a little background. Kratom is not yet on the federal controlled substances list as of yet, and it's not for lack of trying. Kratom has been on the Schedule I potential list now twice, and because of public outcry to their local politicians, that has been blocked, and to me that's of concern. Kratom is highly addictive. It is technically still legal. I have people getting very large quantities off the internet from it. Many of the elderly are finding it as their cheap relief. And the problem is it produces both stimulant effects in low doses and sedative effects in high doses. It comes in tablet, capsule, extract forms. Sometimes people put it in tea. Some people will just ingest it, through foods and things like that. But it can cause seizures, psychotic effects, Many people who are struggling with MS are turning to Kratom. Folks who are trying to get off opioids are turning to Kratom. And let me just say that I appreciate their attempt at reducing risk, but however, there's a risk here. It's highly addictive. It can be harmful, and they're still self-medicating. Next slide, please. Okay, bath salts have been around for quite some time, but they're highly dangerous. They're synthetic stimulants. They're in the carcinone class of drugs. They used to be marketed in vape and head shops, the internet, gas stations, convenience stores, adult bookstores. You know, it has not for human consumption written on it, but everybody knows that it is for human consumption. The main ingredient in it is MDPV, which is highly addictive. And it's interesting because these substances here are the ones that cause people to have their body to feel like they're on fire. So when you see these news broadcasts where people are running through the streets naked and appearing to behave psychotically, this is probably why. It really has a person literally out of their mind, and it causes their body to feel like it's on fire. Now, if you'll notice the packaging, it's very focused on hitting the youth. There was an act several years ago, legislation that put this on the controlled substance list, but the manufacturers keep trying to change the molecular structure, so it's off like 1 or 2 numbers. So the government went ahead and installed the analog list. So if anything looks like it, acts like it, or has an effect like it, they put it on the list. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, K2 or Spice has also been around. You can also see the packaging is very enticing to youth. It is another designer drug category, and it takes THC, which is the main ingredient of marijuana, and it's synthetic cannabinoids that are created in a laboratory. And they're marketed, these packages, they're marketed as potpourri, and it says not for human consumption, but we all know that it's smoked. They're smuggled in from China in particular, and it's really acetone and THC powder that's sprayed on dry plant material, and you use that in a pipe. But it's been responsible for many overdose deaths, resulting in heart attack or acute kidney injury as well. Next slide, please. Okay, I'd like to take some time to really talk about the opioid epidemic. Now, I'm using the term opioid because it really combines opiates, which are the pure plant matter, with the synthetic drugs. So we're going to call those opioids. Now, let's focus on heroin for a moment. And I think it would be very important just to walk you through briefly the progression of how someone actually becomes addicted to heroin, because of all the people I've worked with, very few, if any, that I've ever heard of started with heroin. It was a gradual from other things. Now, evidence shows that very often people have had injury or surgery resulting in having legitimate pain afterwards. They were prescribed opiate painkillers. Now, some people may begin to use more than prescribed and more frequently, but when their recovery has reached the point that they no longer meet medical criteria for pain meds, the doctor ends the prescription refills. Now, individuals that may have begun a psychological and then physical dependence will begin to seek the pain meds elsewhere. And usually it is through friends and family, many of which have leftover meds. Now, how many of us have had a dental procedure or a surgical procedure and were prescribed pain meds and have leftovers at home? Now, there's usually many of us who do that. Now, this is usually the first line of access, especially with young people, 12 to 17 years of age, some of which who have had legitimate sports-related injuries. Now, what we're finding is they'll raid their family's medicine cabinets. They'll go over to grandma's, raid her medicine cabinet, or they'll be babysitting the family cabinets. I mean, I've had adults go to realty open houses and take a tour of the home privately and raid people's medications from the cabinets. I mean, they'll start with friends and family in that inner circle. Now, when that inner circle access is used up, people will then turn to the streets, where the pills cost an average of $1 per milligram. Now, this could be $30 a pill, $60, $80 a pill, and as the person's tolerance increases, they need more pills per day, requiring hundreds of dollars per day just to keep up the habit. And usually this is causing desperate behavior. Then you'll see stealing from family, friends, strangers, and other illegal behavior. Now, I want to review what intensifies this behavior. It is actually the withdrawal from opiates that causes people to become so desperate. Withdrawal from opiates is not life-threatening like the withdrawal from alcohol, but it makes a person feel like they're dying or they want to die. It's intense, it's painful, they get the sweats, chills, diarrhea, full body muscle cramps for hours on end. And if you think about it, if you've ever had a cramp in your toe or your calf, it's excruciating, but imagine that, head to toe. Now, when despite the best efforts of the individual to try to perpetuate the cost of street pills is no longer enough, most people turn to heroin. It can be snorted, injected. It comes in small wax paper stamp bags like you see here in front of you, very often with a popular symbol stamp decal on it like you see LeBron James, Breaking Bad, etc. The average cost for a stamp bag is $10. And sometimes you can get it for $4 to $6 if you're buying in a large quantity. Now, many people begin snorting and then eventually begin using IV shooting with works, which would be anything for a tourniquet, the needle, the syringe, the actual spoon. It's a small amount that you see powder here with water melted, and then they inject that. Now, very often, addicts do not realize that they're only getting 25% heroin to begin with because it's cut. It's always cut with something. It can be cut with baking soda, baby laxatives, lactose. It could even be cut with fentanyl. And this is where we're seeing the increase in overdose rates. Right now, the illegal drug manufacturers are realizing that it's cost prohibitive to continue to grow plants. What they've done is they're creating synthetic heroin known as fentanyl in labs, very often in Mexico and China, that only require about 2 people to run the lab. Now, fentanyl is 50 to 80% more potent than heroin. It's cheaper, and it prolongs the high. Now, if the individual is accustomed to heroin, they know how their body responds. But many times, they're actually getting fentanyl. And I've actually had patients who have relapsed back on IV use, believing it was heroin, but they were actually getting fentanyl. I had one man overdose. He did not die, but came close to. As you can see, we're going to go to the next slide. You'll see the
Cheryl,
yes.
Could you make sure that you stay in front of your computer when you're speaking? It cuts out a couple of times,
Okay.
probably just from moving around.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, can you hear? Okay.
You're good.
All right, thank
we're
you.
good now.
Okay, thank you. As you can see in the picture, the sample of fentanyl as compared to a stamp bag of heroin is remarkable. And as if there were not already risk enough here, another synthetic opioid is it's a large animal tranquilizer called carfentanil that's used at zoos. It is 4,000 times more potent than heroin and is not meant for human consumption. A flake of sand size of carfentanil landing on their skin can send them into an overdose. And that's why many first responders who are unaware of what they're actually dealing with have overdosed. You would think the dealers would not want to lose their clientele from death, but however, once the word gets on the street that people are dying from it, addicts flock to it. Now, just to make you aware of a new trend, heroin pills have hit the street. They're designed to resemble oxycodone, but are made with opiate pharmaceuticals and heroin. Now, I don't have a picture of that to show you, but they are blue or blue-green in color with brown speckles, and they're stamped with a capital M as in Mary inside a box, and on the other side the number 30. Now, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention reports that overdose rates have reached epidemic proportions, and they state that anyone who uses prescription opioids or illegal opioids such as heroin or fentanyl are at risk of overdose. And I'll tell you, at least one of their official stats have said that 22% of users will have a near-miss experience each year. Next slide, please. Okay, if you look at these statistics, in Pennsylvania we had 4,642 documented overdoses in 2016, deaths that is, that were similar, well, that panned out to about 13 deaths per day. In Maryland, 1,259, or 3 to 4 deaths per day. In Virginia, 1,400, or 3 to 4 deaths per day. And if you ask me, that's too many people dying. Now, addicts will often not know how much they're taking or actually what they are taking. And too much of an opiate actually chokes the signals your brain sends out to telling you to breathe. Now, in many states, there is new legislation where dealers can be charged now with drug distribution resulting in death. And many dealers now are then shifting to selling crystal meth or cocaine as an alternative to avoid these consequences. Now, there's a substance I do want to mention to you that's a combination of what I've mentioned with some added extras. It's the newest death toll concern, and it's called gray death. Now, gray death is a mixture of heroin, fentanyl, which is a synthetic, carfentanil, which is a synthetic, and then another synthetic opioid called U47700. It looks a lot like a cement mixture, and users can smoke it, inject, or snort it. It can be purchased for about $10 on the street, and it's 50 times more potent than heroin. Now, the good news is there has been some movement here in saving lives with Narcan, and I'm sure you guys have heard that on the news. Narcan actually can counter the effects of respiratory arrest that opioids can cause. Now, the naloxone molecule that's in Narcan relieves respiratory depression. It can be administered via nasal spray or shots. With synthetic opioids, it needs to be given in repeated doses. Now, people were overdosing. First responders were giving them Narcan, and because the first responders didn't realize it was a synthetic that they had ingested, they didn't know to administer it repeatedly, and people were dying. So the training has really been increased for our first responders for not only their safety, but better ways to address the people they are working with at that time. Now, there's a lot of stigma out there from the public saying, well, let these people die. You know, there's really no need to fight so hard. And what we're saying from the clinical community is that, you know, if we can spare a life long enough to perhaps assist them in getting help, then we may be able to make a movement. So many of the states have adopted the standing order legislation where an addict or family member can actually get a standing order prescription of Narcan to have on hand. Next slide, please. Now, these are the signs of overdose. Again, the person's going into respiratory arrest. Their brain is not getting the signals to breathe, so their breathing is slowing or not breathing at all. You'll see lips and nails are blue. They're very often choking, throwing up. They sound like they're snoring. Sometimes they're making gurgling sounds. The skin is cold and clammy, and you are unable to wake them up. Definitely call 911, and very often 911 will suggest starting the rescue breathing. Next slide, please. Now, many of you may ask, what can a community do to start the assistance in your own part of the world? Well, that would be to clean out your medicine cabinets. Look into your local drug drop-off disposal programs. Do not lend your prescription meds to other people, even though, you know, it may be someone you know and you have the best intentions. It's just good policy. Don't do it. Education programs for ages 12 to 17, which we see are the hardest hit areas right now where this is starting. Statewide, nationwide, there are many initiatives to begin these programs for the kids. Again, Narcan is one of those things that if you're, you know, for my own sake, I've been going to my local pharmacy or the ones that family members might go to and just asking the head pharmacist, do you honor standing order here? And I'm surprised at how many do not, and that's because they don't want the stigma. So what you can do is actually go to your own neighborhood pharmacy, ask if they're on standing order. If they are not, just put a call into your state attorney general and let them know, because that's how we're going to impact change. And then medical communities are now unifying to find safer, more effective ways to treat pain. Next slide. Now, in the 2 slides I have here, I have many resources for you. If you are a family member of someone you're concerned about, please give EAP a call. If you have a family, if you are an individual who is struggling, please give us a call. We'll get you where you need to be. If you want to do your own research, I mean, here are some national websites to assist a person in getting treatment assistance. Next slide, please. And then the final slide is the community resources, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and then you'll see the family resources, Al-Anon, which is the family program to Alcoholics Anonymous, and then Nar-Anon, which is the family program to Narcotics Anonymous, and then the supportproject.org. I mean, there are many amazing resources out there. Now, these community resources are free of charge, all confidential, but then the Employee Assistance Program is here to assist you with anything you may need at any time, 24/7. Now, Beth, I'm open for questions.
That sounds great. Cheryl, I do have one question. I wanted to clarify. You mentioned that the pharmacy's on standing order, meaning that you could go into any pharmacy if they're accepting standing orders and get Narcan, or do you have to have a doctor's order?
No, you can go into the pharmacy and actually get Narcan directly, but the pharmacy has to be part of the program.
Okay. Okay. Are most like national pharmacies like CVS and Walgreens and things in that program?
A lot of them are.
Okay.
But I'm finding that some select community ones are not choosing to be. And that's when we can perhaps move it along by calling the It's not that we're telling on someone, we're just making them aware. I mean, in my community, we have 320 pharmacies and only 22 are participating. And when you're a family member who's scared of losing someone, you really want to be able to have that Narcan.
Yeah. What's the cost for Narcan?
Well, I am not sure about that.
Okay.
It varies. You know, there's the nasal spray, and then there's the actual shot injection. I've heard quotes of $300, but now, you know, depending upon does insurance policy help pay for it, I don't have a quote for you. I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. I was just curious, and I'm sure our pharmacies would know.
Folks could actually talk with their doctor to try to move that process along. That would probably help.
Okay. So I would imagine many physicians are keeping that in stock these days. So if you go to your physician, they will give you an order if you need it to get it, a prescription.
Yeah, we try to facilitate that.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I know I ran through this rather quickly, but this is kind of giving you an overview of some of the major trends that are happening.
So Cheryl, if somebody is concerned about a family member, what do you recommend they do?
Well, I would recommend calling the Employee Assistance Program, because we can do right on the spot assessment of what the situation is really, of what's going on. Now, obviously, if someone is in an urgent situation, I would call 911 without doubt. Now, I do want to say that legislation has passed in all states that the Good Samaritan law, if someone is helping someone who's currently under the influence, and they may be even under the influence themselves, they can safely get them to a hospital emergency room without consequence. So if it's not an urgent matter, but, you know, in other words, they're not in dire straits at that moment, but you're concerned about them, call the EAP. We can help you get a game plan. Sometimes it's family members that are seeking help first, which is okay, and it's pretty natural, to where we can get you solid with a plan so that you can better be equipped to assist your loved one. And we can even talk
Great.
with your loved one, your family member.
Terrific. Terrific. And you raise a good point there, Cheryl, about families and the impact on families, which is something so important and we're seeing every day. Well, that takes us to 12:30, and I want to thank you, Cheryl, for a very informative presentation, and thank you all for joining us. I think we will continue to address this topic in the future, as we can see by the participation in this particular seminar that it's important to folks. So thanks so much, Cheryl, for the terrific information and the education. Appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. Bye-bye.